Many people talk about the ups and downs of married life, but no one really prepares you for life after your spouse passes away. Welcome to Widowhood Real Talk with Tina, a safe place for widows, widowers, and their friends and family to talk about love and loss. Find comfort as you listen to honest conversations between Tina and invited guests who've experienced the loss of their forever partner. Share their stories of love, grief, and healing. You are not alone in this journey. Join today's episode and discover a wealth of resources and learn how to connect with others who are traveling the same path. This is Widowhood Real Talk with Tina.
Hello, Widowhood. Our guest today is Mr. Phil Weiss. He is the founder of Apprise Wealth Management, beginning his career in 1987 as a tax professional at Deloitte & Touche. Phil has accumulated over 25 years of experience in the personal finance and investment management. He holds the esteemed credentials as a CFA, CPA, and a RLP. This conversation with Phil is going to be so helpful because one of the things that we experience when we're dealing with the grief of a loved one is our confidence. And that confidence in our identity can spill over into our fear of maybe managing money. This conversation is going to give you tips on how to regain your confidence and the importance of tax planning and so much more. Let's get into this conversation now. Hello, Phil. Welcome to the Widowhood.
Thanks, Tina. Thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Well, thank you. When you hear welcome to the Widowhood, what's the first thing that really, like, if it was a ticker tape, what would have appeared upon your head when hearing that?
I think of welcome to the neighborhood instead of welcome to the widowhood.
Okay. That's fair. That's fair. And so let me ask you something totally unrelated. What is your favorite ice cream?
My favorite ice cream, it's mint chocolate chip.
Okay. Now, is it the green or the white one? Because it comes different ways sometimes.
As long as it's minty, it's usually green, but I like the mint. And there's another, there are other flavors that I like, but anytime I go someplace new and we get ice cream, I always get that because it was also my mother's favorite. So it's like a nice little connection. It makes me remember her when I go to different places. Okay,
cone or cup?
I get a cup.
Okay. All right, cool. So what made you start this business that you have? What was the road to this?
So it was a different road than most take, but kind of the biggest part of this is growing up in my house. It was the typical family model. My father was responsible for the finances. My mom was responsible for my sister and me. But here's the thing, when it came to finances, my father wasn't very good at it at all. We had unpaid bills. We had services turned off. When I was old enough to drive, I remember going to local utility companies to pay them so that things could be turned back on.
Wow.
When it was time for me to go to college, I was told, go anywhere you want. So I wanted to be a doctor and I was the psychology major and I decided to go to Duke. And I finished 3 years and I'd done a lot to stay in school. I met with the president of the university. I worked out a lot of things. But at the end of my junior year, I only needed 6 courses to graduate. But we agreed that I needed to step away until I could pay what I owed and then I could come back. It was a toxic situation at home. So I moved across the country to Arizona. When I was ready to go back, I decided medical school wasn't the right thing. I had good grades, but they weren't good enough. And a psychology major, like that's just more grad school and that's more cost than everything else. And I decided I wanted to study accounting, and Duke doesn't have accounting degrees. So that meant I wasn't going to go back. So I applied to University of Arizona. I applied to Rutgers because I'm originally from New Jersey. And I decided to go to Rutgers because I thought I'd get a better job coming out of Rutgers. So I went to Rutgers. You know, those credit card checks you get in the mail. This is not great financial advice, right? But there's good debt and bad debt. I consider this good debt. I use them if I had to pay rent on the house that I shared with other people. If I had to pay tuition and I didn't have the cash, that's what I used. And I ended up college with a good amount of credit card debt. And I remember looking at those bills and saying, you don't make enough to pay this much in interest. And so I put in place a plan to pay off my debt, which I did faster than I wanted. Anyway, when I finished school, I moved back home because that was really all I could afford. And one day I came home and I got the mail. And there were these credit card bills that had my name on them. But there's only one problem. They weren't mine. My father had forged my name to get credit because he couldn't get it on his own. And before I confronted him, I reached out to the credit card companies. One of them actually sent me a copy of the application. It was his handwriting. So I went to him and said, "What's going on? I have this." He admitted what happened. So instead of paying rent to my father at that point, I used it to pay off his credit card debt. While all this was going on, my mother had gone back to school and she became an occupational therapist. And I know that she really did this to put herself in a strong enough position financially that she could survive and thrive on her own. Unfortunately, my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer before any of that happened. And that's when we realized how bad the financial situation at home really was. My mom asked me to help. I did what I could, but my mom didn't make it. Her breast cancer metastasized to her brain. She passed away about 18 months later. But what had happened was my parents had to sell the house because they would have been foreclosed on. Those credit cards that had been in my name, they moved them into my father's name. They were all delinquent. Like there was all these things going on. And that's what I was trying to help with. And so now I view my job or my role is to try to help keep other women from experiencing and going through the kind of things that my mom did. And so that's kind of how I got to my firm, like why I work with who I work with, right? Because I work with women facing new beginnings. And my background, my career path is also different. Like I started at Deloitte as a tax guy. I eventually specialized in international corporate tax planning and research. I got to the point where I didn't really like that work and I didn't think it had a lot of redeeming value. Like international tax, I can tell a company how to shuffle paper around basically to lower their tax bill. And I just didn't feel like that was a really redeeming thing to do. While I was doing that, I also was writing for the Motley Fool. They used to have online portfolios. And I learned about the CFA and I said, that's my way to get out of the tax department. So I pursued the CFA. I got it. And I eventually went to work for a research provider that was independent. And I covered oil and gas stocks for 7 years. I left there and I went to work for another advisor. And I was there for about 3 years. I mostly was responsible for managing portfolios and ultimately realized it wasn't the right fit. And that's when I tell people I got tired of working for idiots. So I decided to be the idiot and I launched my firm.
And your firm is called?
Apprise Wealth Management.
And what is CFA and why is that important?
So a CFA is a chartered financial analyst. That's what that designation is. And so it's really, when it comes to investing, people will tell you that it's one of the most valuable designations that you can have to help you understand things about investing, whether it be managing portfolios. Some people don't realize there's a lot of things that relate to financial planning that are part of the program. You learn about fixed income or bond investing. You learn about stock investing. It's really a great way to get educated further about the world of investing. And when I chose that, I was thinking about going and getting an MBA instead. But the advantage I had was when I started that process, we had 3 kids. And by doing that, that's a program that it's self-study and I didn't have to worry about being someplace else and going to class and all that. I could do it within the context of my life and not take myself away from my family and my kids.
When you say, thank you for sharing that, what is the requirement to obtain a CFA?
The CFA, it's 3 exams. And like I said, they cover all areas of investing. There's certain educational requirements. I mean, as a CPA, I didn't really have to worry about those because I had already taken enough of the finance courses and I had a really good finance background anyway. So it's a combination of some undergraduate finance work and then going through the course material. Like I said, there's 3 parts. Now you can do it a little bit faster, but when I did it, you could take 1 part per year. And it was always right after Memorial Day weekend was when the tests were.
Okay. So there's always continuing education. This is not like something you take once. You're always staying current.
Correct. Just like a CPA, just like the CFAs and the CFPs, like all those designations like that, they all have separate continuing education requirements. And I'm a registered life planner too. And even that, I have continuing education requirements too. So I have my sister became a speech pathologist. And one day she was complaining to me because she had to do 8 hours of continuing education. I'm like, 8 hours? My CPA requires 40 hours a year. My CFA requires 20 hours a year. My registered life planner requires another 8. And then as a financial advisor in the state, based in the state of Maryland, I have to do another 12. So I'm said, so 8 hours, that's nothing. I got
small
plenty.
game. So being in the state of Maryland, are you limited to people you can help, or is there a particular region, or what is the base in which you can support people?
I can really work with people anywhere in the country. I have clients right now in 18 states. The only thing that I have to do is I have to pay attention to how many clients I have in each state, because the states have their own rules as to how many clients you have to have in a state before you're required to register separately. And that my firm's grows a little bit more. I can become SEC registered, and then it's kind of blanket across all the states. But for right now, I'm still at the state level. So in addition to Maryland, I'm registered in New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Virginia. I'm notice filed in Texas because they have their own rule that says when you have one client, you have to tell us and whatever. So it just means you have to pay attention to where you are. But I have clients on the West Coast. I have clients in the Midwest. I have clients on the up and down the East Coast. So it doesn't really matter. My business is largely virtual, so I can work with people pretty much anywhere.
Thank you. What are some special, I guess I'll say, what is the difference when you think of women having to navigate finances in the transition of a spouse passing versus a widower when their spouse passed?
I think the biggest thing is that, I talked about when I was growing up, and it was the typical model. While it's changing now, where more women take the lead in the family finances, in so many households, the husband did take care of the finances. And so when he passes, all of a sudden, here's this poor woman, she's lost her husband. And she might not know very much at all about what was going on with the family finances. Or even if she does, she has our education system. And so that's part of the reason I called my firm Apprise, because Apprise means to inform. And I like to help educate people and help them understand. Our education system hasn't done much to help them be prepared or understand what they have to do. So I think that's really it is. And it's also interesting to me because I've looked at this, and a lot of times women have just as much financial knowledge as men, but they don't have as much confidence. And I've tried this out. And if you give them a quiz on financial concepts, women are more likely to say, I don't know. And that'll make them score lower. But if you pull I don't know out of the answers, the scores are actually pretty comparable. So sometimes it's just that they don't have as much confidence. It's not that they can't understand it or anything else. That's clearly not the case, because I work with a lot of smart women and they can understand plenty of things. And there's plenty of things they know that I don't. But in this area, like, this is what I specialize in, right? And there's certain areas of life I think it really helps to have somebody that's on your side that really understands.
If someone is listening to this conversation and their spouse is still living, what are some things that they can start putting in place to prevent them from being so removed from the family finance?
So one thing that's simple is to talk about it. Like, it's funny. Finance can be like a taboo subject in our country, and people don't like to talk about it. Sometimes it's easier to talk about sex than it is to talk about finances, right? So have some conversations. Make sure that hey, what accounts do we have? Like, here's a simple thing that we forget. Earlier in my career, I said I lived in Tucson, in Arizona.
Yes.
And I worked for an office called the Public Fiduciary's Office. And the Public Fiduciary's Office job was to serve as guardian, conservator, personal representative when there wasn't somebody there. So this is people that couldn't take care of themselves or their finances, or they died without any family member around. And it was our job to take care of them. And when people would pass away, nobody would know what their account, you didn't know what accounts they had, but we used to get mail. And so you'd monitor the mail, and we could get the statements and find out if there were any bank accounts. Now everything's online. People don't usually get very many statements in the mail. Maybe you'll get a tax, like a 1099 or something like that in January, February, but that's it. So we don't know where the accounts are. So just something as simple as, hey, what's a list of our accounts? And do we have a password manager? Do we have someplace that we've written this stuff down so that I can access them if you're not there? That's really important. You want to make sure that for all the financial accounts, as well as social media accounts, and I know I'm a financial advisor, but this still is relevant, make sure that you know that you've set up beneficiaries on all those financial accounts, because if your spouse passes, If there's a beneficiary name, we don't have to worry about the court system. We don't have to worry about probate. Everything just passes directly to the survivor because they're named as a beneficiary. If there's no beneficiary name, then you have to rely on the state system and the court system to decide who gets what. So you want to make sure you do things like that. And the reason I brought up social media is because if you have a social media account and you pass and you haven't kind of made some type of provision, like that account could just stay there and it could become spammed and there could be fraud and everything else that could happen. So it's also important to include those too, but you want to make sure that you have understanding what accounts there are. You want to make sure that you have and know how to access those accounts. If there's any professionals that your spouse works with, make sure that you're part of those conversations. When I work with a couple, I always want to work with both. I don't want to just work with one or the other. Now, there's always one that's going to take the lead, but you'd like to have both there so that they know what's going on. And one thing that happens a lot is that some financial advisors, if they're working with a couple, they'll focus on him. And then when he passes, guess what happens? The spouse doesn't know that advisor and they're going to go find somebody else because they're not comfortable with them and they never paid them any attention. So just make sure you're part of things, have conversations. Don't be afraid to bring it up and talk about it. I know that sometimes it could be a contentious subject because one person wants this and the other person wants that, or you spent too much or whatever, but you want to make sure you talk about it and that you have a plan and that you know what's there.
For the person that is a widow and she's left with all of this information, it's just been a few weeks, her husband has passed, and she's just trying to figure this all out. Is there a good first step in this process?
I think that having somebody help you to say, here's the different things that we should be looking for, and to start to work with you on the process. And look, when you lose your spouse, it's a very difficult thing. That's clear. So we don't want to make a lot of decisions right away because you're probably not in the right emotional state to do it. But on the other hand, there are some things we want to think about. How are you going to pay your bills? It's not like your different companies that you owe money to, whether it be a credit card company, whether it be a utility company, whoever it may be. You have a mortgage, all that. They're not going to say, oh, you don't have to pay right now because you just lost your spouse. So you want to make sure that you know that there's something coming in. So like if there's life insurance, you want to make sure you file for that early so that you can get that money so that money comes in. So that's something. When it comes to things like your house, like I have somebody that I've been working with, and we have this conversation a lot because her husband passed away 15 months ago. And I think she's going to go to a continuing care community, though she inherited some money after her husband passed, which could change. I told her she doesn't have to move now because he's in a different position from an affordability standpoint. But I said, if you're going to move, you want to do it within 2 years. And the reason is because this couple was together for decades and they paid very little for their house. And the house is appreciated in value a lot. And the tax law says that if you have up to $500,000 of capital gains, you don't have to pay tax on them. Anything over and above that, you do. And yes, when you pass, you're going to get what's called a step up, so that in this case, if the house was jointly owned, you get a step up for only half the value because the other piece is still yours. So that doesn't step up. So that's going to reduce some of your gains, but you could still have gains over and above that if you live there long enough. So I said, if you don't want to pay capital gains, then we have to move within 2 years. I'm making you aware of that. You can say, you know what? That's too soon. I don't want to make that decision yet, but I just want to make sure you're aware. So like, there's things like that too, that you just want to make sure that some decisions need to come sooner than later. Another one, like the government's not going to let you not file your taxes because your spouse passed, right? So we have to make sure that the things that really need to happen.
Thank you. The word life planning is used a lot. What does that mean, and why is that something that we need to look into?
So I love life planning. And I said I'm a registered life planner, and it's experiential training. So I'll tell you another part of my story that I didn't mention is that when I went through this process, I remember that when my mother passed, I tried to set up a scholarship I said my mother was an occupational therapist, and I tried to set up a scholarship through her professional organization in New Jersey for women who were going back to school. I didn't really have the financial capability, and there wasn't enough to really make it work. And I remembered this as I went through the life planning process. It's now one of my elements of my life plan is to create a scholarship for women who go back to school later in life, like my mother did. And life planning, to me, if I really sum it up, there's two things that I can say. One is that it's about avoiding regret. It's not about living a life with regret. It's about avoiding it by identifying those things that you can do now so that you don't get to the end of life regretting these things that you haven't done. It's figuring these things out, what's really important to you. When I talk about what's really important to you, you have to think about the idea that it's more than money. I think that we have four primary resources: our time, our energy, our attention or our focus, and our money. So it's a team. That's the time, energy, attention, money. That's a team. We have a team of resources. And what I would like you to do is to be able to align how you use that team of resources with what's important to you. So it's not about worrying about FOMO of what everybody else has. It's about doing those things that are really most important to us.
Oh, so the idea, not just how much money I have, but what do I want to do with my life and how do I plan on succeeding in those areas?
Correct. And sometimes we set these artificial goals, like I want to have X, right? I want to have $1 million. And then we get to $1 million and now we want 2. And then the next thing you know, we want 5 or whatever it is. And like, I know we don't all get there, but I'm just saying like that, it keeps ramping up, but it's about figuring out what's enough and what's really important to us. And those are the things like when we take the life plan and we fold it into your financial plan. So now we know that those things that are in your financial plan that are really important to you are the things from your life plan. So we make sure that we have to help you accomplish and do those things that mean the most to you.
Thank you. There may be somebody listening to this conversation, their spouse passed. They did not have life insurance. They literally were just that last check. And they still have several years. They now have to return to work. And this may seem to them unnecessary because they don't see themselves with a massive amount of wealth. But the idea of retiring one day, how do you get from that situation to a place of thinking that I could retire and have a life that I'm comfortable with?
So that could be hard, right? And if we take what we have and we think about, it's never too late to start saving for retirement. Clearly, it's never too early either, right? The sooner you can start, like if you have kids, you can help your kids. Like if your kids have a summer job, you can fund a Roth IRA. And like I was with my son, one of my sons in the car a couple of weeks ago, and he had funded his Roth IRA and we were funding his health savings account. And I said to him, someday when I'm gone, you're going to remember me because of this. And you're going to say, thanks, Dad, because you're going to be able to do the things that you want. You're going to be able to retire early, whatever it is that you want to do, because we started to do these things really early. But again, it's never too late to start. So if you have to go back to work, you just have to think about, how do I allocate my money so that I can do what I want. I can live okay, but I'm also saving, right? And remember too, that if you're a widow, you are going to get some Social Security benefit at some point. And if you have not worked or didn't work long enough and your spouse's benefit was bigger than yours, you're going to get their benefit at some point. So you will have that working for you too. But you just want to see what you can do to save as much as you can to make the most of it.
Thank you. And you mentioned Social Security. Sometimes people hear different ages that they should or should not get remarried because that would impact their Social Security. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. So if you have been married more than one time, like being married either to your current spouse currently or for more than 10 years or more, that allows you to be able to collect based upon your spouse's benefit. It's once you're past 60, I'm 95% sure that I'm giving you the right answer here. Social Security, there's a morass of rules, but I think once you're past 60, then you don't have to worry the same about getting remarried, because I just said you have to be married for at least 10 years. So yes, you can go back, but if I'm currently married to somebody else, I can't draw based upon a prior spouse. But when you're 60, those rules get relaxed. I believe it's when you're 60 that those rules are relaxed. But like I said, I'm not 100% sure on that one. I should know, but I haven't looked at that particular, I haven't been asked that question for a while, so I'm not
That's okay.
100%.
But I do know a lot of people wait until 60 to think about remarrying to make sure that they still have access to those funds.
Yes.
I've heard the term role models and I've heard financial. How do you put those together to have a financial role model? And who would some of those people be?
So it's funny because I told you the story. So I say, when it came to finances, I had a terrible role model, but it ended up working out okay because I learned everything not to do. Ideally, you want to find somebody that's in your life because you want it to be in your life because it's easier. I mean, you can do reading and things like that, but if you can find somebody in your life that you think is doing the right things the right way, that you can talk to and learn from. That's what I think of when I'm looking for a financial role model. Just somebody that can model the right way to do things or to do things in a way that helps you to be prepared to have, to live a quality life now and in retirement.
Thank you. In the beginning of our conversation, you mentioned that oftentimes people lack confidence in dealing with the finances. And also when your spouse passed, it has a way of destroying your identity because so much of yourself was connected to that. Can you recommend some ways that people can gain their confidence back and as it relates to dealing with their finances?
It can be hard, right? And it depends on the person. Because I think some people have the discipline to focus and spend time doing things on their own and learning that way. But personally, I always find it better to have somebody that I can talk to and bounce ideas off of. Like I tell people, I don't believe there are dumb questions. It's only dumb when you don't ask the question, because if you didn't know the answer and you don't ask, you're never going to know the answer. So it's important when you're thinking about that you find people that you could be comfortable with, that will accept you, that will not belittle you because you asked something that might have been basic. But if you don't know, the only way to find out is to ask. But I just think it's really working with a financial advisor. It's in a lot of ways, it's an intimate relationship. And I don't mean the way we normally think of intimacy, but like when I've worked with somebody on their life plan, I know so much about them. Like I've had times where somebody said, I don't think I've ever told anybody that before. As a financial advisor, I think it's important to work as a fiduciary, and being a fiduciary means that I'm working in your best interest and I'm making recommendations in your best interest, not the things that are best for me. And if I've gotten to know you and I've worked with you on your life plan and I understand these things that matter to you, I really can be a fiduciary because it's so much easier for me to make recommendations in your best interests if I really know you and know what matters most to you.
Thank you. There are financial advisors that get paid different ways. Some people get paid on a commission based on the transactions you're doing. Some are paid on a flat fee. Do you have a preference or a recommendation for those types of payments?
So personally, I would stay away from anybody that works in a commission base because they're being paid to sell you product. And a lot of times there's two different, like I set up fiduciary, I work in your best interest. And then people that are working and getting commissions are typically paid have to follow a suitability standard. So suitability means I make recommendations that are suitable for you, but they might not be the best thing for you. So to me, you always want to work with somebody that's a fiduciary because they're obligated to work in your best interest. And they don't have any incentive to sell you any product. When I say so, commissions can come in multiple ways, right? We don't have them as much on purchasing stocks and things like that as we used to, but all kinds of insurance. Everybody that sells you insurance, they get paid commission, and the amount of commission that they get relative to what you're paying, it takes a few years before you even get back to even because you're paying them so much. There's mutual funds that get sold with commissions and fees that the advisor gets. Like that's too transaction based. I think flat fee or getting paid, and I have a mixture. Some of my clients pay me a flat fee that gets paid quarterly, and some of my clients pay me based upon a percentage of assets. But either way, I'm being paid to provide a service. The mechanism in those two is slightly different, but I'm being paid to provide you a service and I'm working on your behalf. So I always recommend that you would work with somebody that's a fiduciary that's going to work for you and not try to sell you.
Thank you. And speaking of life insurance, on a very high level, what are the different types of life insurance and why does one generally pick one type over another?
So typically, I recommend term life insurance, which would mean I get a policy that covers me for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, whatever the number of years are. And we'll typically pay a flat annual premium for the duration of that policy. The only downside of that, and it's not necessarily a downside, but if I had a 20-year policy and I live for more than 20 years, guess what happens? I just paid those premiums for 20 years for no reason, like in essence, no reason, right? There was really reason because it was for my family so that if something happened to me, they would be protected. But when that period ends, the policy ends. So that's term life. There's whole life. And so whole life is really, and this is why I don't like it, because you're combining investing with buying insurance. And the downside of that is, remember I talked about these commissions, the firm has to recover those costs. So you end up paying more than if you took the same amount and bought term and then invested the rest, because your fees for investing should be less. So that's typically better. Some people really like it. There can be tax reasons at times that whole life can work. But those are the most common types of insurance. There's also things like annuity contracts where you invest a certain amount of money so that you get paid a certain amount at some point in the future. Again, there's a lot of fees. Those things can be really expensive. Now, when I have a client that comes to me with one of those, a lot of times because of the provisions of the contract, they're already in it, and it may not make sense to get out, and we have to stay in it. But before you enter it, make sure you understand. I mean, you can get them to be in a book like this, trying to explain it. Like if there's that much stuff to explain what it is, it's really complicated and not easy to understand. And that's there to make it hard for you to figure out. Now, there are some people that say, you know what, I really need to have X amount of money because it's going to make me feel more comfortable spending or doing other things. And so there are things that you can get, like a fixed annuity, where at a beginning, when I reach a certain age, I get paid a certain amount of money every month, quarter, year, whatever it is. But the only downside is, you buy those, and if you live less than a certain number of years, you can often end up, you paid more than you ever got back. But again, there's a lot of psychology that comes with money and investing and all that type of thing. So sometimes there can be instances, I don't see it happen a lot, but there can be instances where just some people, we have this whole thing as we work during our lives to say, I have to save, I have to save, I have to save. And then we get to retirement and it's hard to spend. And so sometimes for somebody that has that mentality, going and saying, let's buy you a fixed annuity. And again, I would do this with somebody that doesn't charge commission. Like I don't profit from it because that's not how my business is set up. But maybe it makes sense for you to say, you know what, you're going to have you're going to have your Social Security benefit, and you're going to have this annuity this money coming in. For some people that can make sense. But again, we can structure an investment portfolio to do that. Like I call it a retirement paycheck. We can take the amount of money that's in your portfolio and we can structure it so that we can pay you a certain amount from your portfolio. It's just some people just aren't comfortable because guess what that means? At some point, your balance may start to go down.
Thank you. This has been great and very informative. If you can keep all the knowledge you have now and speak to younger Phil, let's say about 20, what would you tell him?
So at 20, that's when I was at Duke. And I guess the first thing that I would say is just start saving sooner. Even when it's hard. Like I remember when I was working for Deloitte and we had a 401k, and one of my friends said, oh, you need to put money into this. I'm like, but I can't really afford it. And they were giving you a match. And you think about it, like when you have a workplace retirement plan and they offer you a match, they assume you're taking it. When they decide how much money they're paying you, they include that. So to me, if you didn't take it, you're basically throwing away money that you're going to get. And the typical match is if you put in 6%, you get a 3% match. Well, that's a 50% return on your money, right? Because I put in 6 and now it's 9% of my salary. So that's a return I can't guarantee anywhere else except that. So I think that's the main thing that I would think of, is just find ways, even though I said I incurred credit card debt and things like that, and maybe that's not great, but as soon as I got out of that situation, that's when you want to start saving. Because but even then, even with the credit card debt, I still would take that match, because that's a 50% return. And the credit card debt, if we think about where rates are now, and let's say it's around 20%, like that's not ideal in any way, shape, or form, but that 50% return still beats the 20. So it'd be a tough call there. But I think that's the main piece of advice, just to start saving as soon as you can.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to make a statement to my listeners, and then I'd like for you to close out this conversation.
Okay.
Thank you for being here. I am sorry for the person that you have lost that has drawn you to this conversation, but I know this has been valuable and helpful, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you, Tina, so much for having me. And I know that your listeners, hopefully there's a lot of things that they can take out of today that can help them in their situation. And if you'd like to talk to me, my firm is Apprise Wealth Management. You can go to my website. It's Apprise Wealth, and that's APPRISE wealth.com. You can go there and you can schedule a phone call. I don't charge anything for an initial consultation. It doesn't mean we have to work together. I'm happy to talk to you, find out a little bit more about your situation. Sometimes I talk to people and they're not the right fit. And I can still give you some suggestions about things that might be able to be of help. So I'm happy to have that conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for spending another episode with Widowhood Real Talk. If you found the contents of today helpful, share the episode to anyone you know who may need it. Subscribe to the show and tune in to Widowhood Real Talk each week. Then, visit widowhood-realtalkwithtina.org to join the community and access additional resources. Remember, you are not alone in this journey.